Okay. Greetings and welcome to another episode of the TED in Your Head podcast. I am your host, Ted Moreno, certified hypnotherapist and high performance coach. This podcast is all about helping people let go of self-limiting beliefs and transforming their minds. Today, we're going to have another episode of the TED in Your Head interview series where I interview experts in personal transformation. Today, my guest is my friend and colleague, Adriana Avila, licensed marriage and family therapist. She specializes in the area of grief, and she's a certified grief yoga instructor. I lost my place. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Okay, sorry about that. So we'll just edit that out.
Okay.
Through yoga movements, Adriana guides individuals to express grief through movement, breath, and sound. Helping others heal and find peace during difficult situations is her purpose. She is EMDR trained and she's worked with survivors of sexual abuse, suicidality, trauma, and intensive programs. She's passionate about her work. She is a compassionate therapist, and in her spare time, she runs, does yoga, reads, hangs out with her dogs, and spends time with her family. Welcome, Adrienne, and thank you so much for being on my podcast.
Hi, Ted. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Beautiful weather here now in Southern California.
Yes, it is beautiful.
Okay.
Nice for a nice run.
Yes, I know. I actually
Yeah.
started running this morning, and
Oh,
I have to
yeah.
be very careful, right? Because I'm kind of like a little bit older than you. All right. So let's get into this, because the reason I asked you onto my podcast, not only because you're like really cool and obviously a great and compassionate therapist, but grief yoga is something I've never really heard of. Okay.
Mm.
So we're going to talk about that. But the first question I wanted to ask was, what moved you to specialize in grief as a therapist?
Yes, and that's a great question, Ted. It's a long story, so I hope we have some time for it. I will make it. I'll make it concise. So, what moved me to specialize in grief was, of course, my own grief. I really wanted to understand my grief. My upbringings did not really encompass having open dialogue about grief, yet alone emotions. Um, so I encountered death at a very young age with my great grandparents passing away. Then in middle school, my maternal grandfather passed away. And then when I was 17, my paternal grandfather passed away. And that one hit me like a wave crashing on my life.
Mm,
That one was very significant to me. I was 17. Um, I vividly remember being picked up from high school, right? So I was 17, I was going to high school. And this is how much your body remembers, which I will get more into when we talk about the grief yoga aspect of it. But I vividly remember being picked up and my mom saying, my mom not saying anything actually, getting to our home. And I saw my dad all dressed in black. And he said, I need to go on a business trip. That didn't sit well with me. I said, he's dressed in black. He looks somber. Something's not right here. So he left with all his siblings. I go back into the home, and my mom comes into the room and drops the news to us. Your grandpa Jose had a stroke and he passed away. What do you do with that?
mm,
Right? At 17, that's all I heard. Your grandpa passed away. We didn't talk about it. He passed away in Mexico, so I didn't go to the ceremony. So to me, it wasn't settling in, right? Because I wasn't seeing, the ceremony and the burial and all of that. So my mom says that. 17, I don't know what to do with it. I'm alone with my emotions. I'm the eldest of my sisters, right? Um, Culturally, we don't really talk about it. So I'm left alone to really deal with it. So what do? I get really busy. So I started coping by going to after school activities, school clubs. I started working at a very young age when I was 17. So I was working a lot. So again, I just kind of like started coping by being really busy. Um, it was not until grad school, I was in my courses, and especially my grief class, we were journaling, and all these emotions started surfacing, right? It was just an experience of like, what's going on? Intuitively, I knew there was my grief. It never went away because it never does.
Mm.
It stayed there with me. Um, so even if I, kept running away from it or was busy, there it was in my face. So in grad school, that's when my healing journey, my healing process began, and I really wanted to understand this grieving business.
Mm.
How do I grieve? What do I do? What are these emotions? So now I'm 35. I've done a lot of healing, whether it's therapy, whether it's retreats. Um, it really started my grieving process, and recently I came across grief yoga, and that was another powerful moment in my healing, because there I was. I was at a David Kessler retreat, which is where I get a lot of my trainings from too. He's a well-renowned grief expert professionally and personally. So I get all my trainings from him, and here I was at a retreat learning from him, like processing my grief, etc. um, and Paul Denniston comes in and engages us, and Paul Denniston is the founder of grief yoga. He engaged the class in a grief movement class, and there I am sitting doing movements, and an emotional release comes up that I thought had healed. And I had such a healing, powerful moment that after the class I went up to Paul and I said, how can I learn this? How can I gift this to others so it can help their healing process? And the rest is history. And here I am now as a yoga instructor and as a grief movement guide as well too.
Well, that's really powerful, and thank you for sharing that, because there's a lot in there. And one of the first things that struck me is, I think your experience of getting very busy and repressing what you're feeling, I think that's very, very common
Mm-hmm.
for us in our American society. And having a funeral or a celebration or a ceremony is, that's a sanctioned way to express grief in a collective way. But what, that lasts maybe a day,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you didn't even have the opportunity to do that, right?
That's correct.
And so I think probably a lot of people can relate to that, like just pushing it down, but at some point in their lives realizing, oh, it's still there, such as
Yeah,
you described. So
absolutely.
maybe you could tell us a little bit about, like, what is grief yoga and how does that help?
Yes. So, as Paul Denniston has in his website, griefyoga.com, he talks about the mission of grief yoga. So it uses movement, breath, and sound to release any pain and suffering, to reconnect back to the love. So it's really attuning to your body, being present to the pain, and allowing anything that's stuck in the body to be released with movement, breath, and sound. And movement, breath, and sound is because it allows you to really express without words what you're feeling internally as well too. I mean, research shows that a lot of our emotions get stuck in our body, kind of like I was talking about, going back when I was 17, right? And a lot of what I felt then, I felt in other moments as well too, because my body was keeping score of experiences that I've had before. There's even a book called The Body Keeps Score.
Hmm.
And research shows that there's a lot of emotions that really get stuck in our body. So grief yoga really allows one to be mindfully present to our pain and move through it. So we're not letting go of anything, because sometimes it feels like, do I need to let go of the love or the memories? No, it's just really allowing you to move through it. And what Paul created was, he calls it a compassionate transformation.
Hmm.
So it includes four different cycles of compassionate transformation. It includes awareness, it includes expression, it includes connection, and it includes surrender. And each of the awareness, expression, connection, and surrender, it encompasses different moves that allows you to move through each of the cycle. So, are you okay if I talk about each one of them?
Yeah, yeah, because the next question I was going to ask is what's the connection between movement and releasing grief? So, yeah, please continue.
Yeah, so awareness, what it does. So the compassionate transformation that Paul talks about is first you go through awareness, right? So the awareness aspect of it is it deepens the breath to quiet the mind. Reason being is because a lot of the times we are in here in our brain with thoughts of should have, could have, regrets, if I only would have done this, if I only would have done that. So it keeps us a lot cognitively. So to move from our thoughts down to our emotions, we start with awareness, right? To create that safety of quieting the mind. So in awareness, we notice where pain lives gently. We start noticing and moving the body. Where does pain live in our body? So it's a mind and brain connection. So where does tension live in our body? Where does pain live in our body? Where does grief live in our body?
Hmm.
Anxiety, fear, etc. So there's a exercise that I like to, one of many exercises, but are you okay if I share it?
Of course, yes,
Yeah.
please.
So it's called the neck release, and you could do it with me too, Ted. Totally
Okay,
up to you.
yeah.
So how I guide people through this is, again, the intention is to really bring up that oxygen to our brain, right? Because when we're breathing, it brings that oxygen to our brain to help calm down our nervous system.
Hmm.
So from a seated, comfortable position, you bring your ear to your shoulder, chin to your chest, opposite ear to shoulder, and just drawing large circles at your own pace, rotating opposite ear to shoulder, chin to chest, opposite ear to shoulder, and then bringing it to a stop, and then going the other way. Opposite ear to shoulder, chin to chest, at your own pace. Just noticing. You can find your own pace. Go as quickly as, or slowly as you like. Whenever you're ready, you can bring it to a stop. Take a deep breath in and deep breath out. And after that, I'll ask, what are you noticing?
Hmm.
What are you noticing if there's tension living in your neck, your shoulders, etc.? It starts kind of like allowing you to be attuned to your body and connecting you to your body.
Hmm.
How did that feel, Ted? That's the awareness part.
Well, I definitely needed that for sure. Okay,
Mhm.
so that felt good. And interestingly enough, there was a time in my life where I really realized that my neck was really locked up, and I would spend a lot of time just doing exactly that. And then
Mm,
I would notice all this emotion coming up,
yes.
and just like and I would do it very slowly. And just felt not only emotional but physical release. Of course, I didn't know what I was doing,
Mm-hmm.
but I just felt like it was a good thing to do, and I got a greater range in my neck from doing that, and just kind of like I'd shudder, and then sometimes I'd feel emotional. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
powerful thing, what you
Yeah.
just demonstrated.
Yes. And I like to share at the beginning of my classes too, Ted, that anything, I'm your guide. I'm just guiding you through all these exercises, through the practices, through the questions. I'm your guide, but it's important that you listen to your body,
Right.
right? The pace that you need to go. Do you need to take a break? Do you go slower? Do you go faster? Is that an exercise you skip? Right? So I really am mindful to really allow others to feel empowered that I'm their guide and they can choose to do whichever exercise they want to, and they don't have to do any they don't want to either.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, that's pretty fascinating. And we could spend a lot of time talking about the mind body connection. We could spend a lot of time talking about how emotions get stuck in the body and what that means, and we're talking
Mhm.
more about an energetic kind of thing, right?
Correct.
We'll save that for another
Yes.
podcast, okay? But,
Yes.
so where did you get your grief yoga training, and was that the same as yoga training, or were those two separate trainings that you went through?
Yes. So all my grief yoga training has been through Paul Denniston.
Okay.
So the griefyoga.com. So he's the founder of grief yoga. So he is the one that has created the grief movement trainings. So he has two separate trainings. He has a grief guide movement training, which is for those that want to learn these skills but don't have a yoga certification or yoga training.
Right.
And then he has teacher yoga training. So that's specific for yoga teachers.
Okay.
So I took both because my yoga journey also began with this grief movement experience that I had. So I went and took my yoga classes and became a yoga instructor to then become a grief yoga teacher.
So you're not only a grief yoga teacher, you can teach people to deal with grief through yoga, but you could also just teach basic yoga,
Correct.
right?
Yes. Uh-huh. Yes.
That's really awesome, man. That is
Yes.
just so cool. So, so aside from taking, your grief yoga class, aside from somebody actually like taking the class,
Yes.
how can people experiencing grief use movement to deal with grief? So you just demonstrated kind of some head and neck rolls. What else can people do to
Yeah.
use movement to deal with grief?
Yeah. That's a great question, Ted. Because um, I want to also say to do any kind of this grief movement, grief yoga, you don't need to be a yoga expert, right? So you don't need to know how to do yoga. There isn't anything that we're doing in regards to flexibility or strength building. It's more about the inner aspect of it, the emotional liberation, right? So I just want to also share that. And other ways to move through grief, because symbolically when we're going through grief, we really need to also get moving, right, to move through so we're not stuck. And part of it is walking, a simple walk, a mindful walk, walking. If you exercise, if you run, if you jog, activities with your children, with your family, just anything that requires some kind of movement of your body. So, again, in grief, symbolically, so we could get moving, it can be doing jumping jacks in your home, it can be stretching, anything that allows the blood flow to flow through your body.
Hmm. So what you're saying is if somebody's experiencing grief, any kind of movement will help them to process and deal with that grief. Yoga, even if it's not grief yoga, but just yoga, walking, jogging, any kind of physical movement, even
Yeah.
if it's just a mindful walk, it doesn't have to be like an all out, breathing hard kind of thing. Even just a nice walk could be helpful to deal
Yeah.
with grief.
Yes, because a lot of what you're doing when you're moving is you're grounded to the present, right? So if you're running, you're present to the run, you're present to the walk, you're present to your exercise. So it grounds you back to the present. So that's very helpful in that sense. And, research shows that it also increases our happy endorphins.
Oh, yeah, of course, of
Mhm.
course.
Mhm.
So, we didn't really talk about this question, but I wanted to get your sense of where you think we are as a nation in our collective grief. It seems to me that we're grieving so many things. Not only the loss of our fellow citizens and
Yes.
family members and friends, but we're
Hmm.
grieving the loss of so many other things. Our freedom to go out and hang out with people, and our freedom to come and go as we please, and not only that, but our certainly freedom from fear. It's been a very fearful time. Nobody wants to get sick. So, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, yes. So collectively, and David Kessler talks a lot about this as well too, about the collective grief that we're all experiencing. Like you mentioned, collective grief in regards to not being able to go see our friends, to go to a restaurant, to celebrate, to even when there is a death, to not have the rituals that we're normally used to having,
Right.
right? That's had an impact of kids not being able to see their friends at school, or after school activities, or sports, or the collective grief that a lot of our first responders are also experiencing, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right. So what do you think it's going to take for us to deal with this? I mean, I know this is kind of an off the wall question, but I mean, obviously this is going to have an impact on our country, like for the foreseeable future, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And are you talking about what one can do individually? Is that?
Well, I think that's kind of where it starts. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, just really being mindful of within as well too. What is it that, or how are we? Because sometimes we're very unaware that something is grief, right? So sometimes we are unaware that maybe we are grieving that we haven't been able to spend that time with
Right.
family, or that we haven't had that ritual of somebody that passed away a few months ago, right? So all of it for me really starts with awareness,
Okay.
being aware of where is the grief? Is there something we're grieving? And if so, what kind of support do I get for that grief that I'm experiencing?
Hmm. Wow. Wow. That's just like a whole nother side to grief. You know, the movement of the body and all of that. Yeah, that's really, really valuable stuff there. So, how can people get in touch with you if they want to talk more or get more information or work with you? How can people do that?
Yes. So they can reach me at Adriana at soultenders.com. So that's my first name, Adriana at soultenders.com. And email is best, but you can also call me at my office number, which is 626-360-2974. So that is my office number and that's my email. And I will be starting two grief movement classes starting in May. So
Okay.
I will be having it'll be 8 week. Each group will be 8 weeks, and we will go through different cycles of compassion and transformation. So, transforming guilt to grace, anxiety to peace, etc., through the movements that I'll be
Okay.
sharing with everybody. Mhm.
And this is going to be so. Currently, you're doing these classes remotely, like over Zoom or Skype or whatever, right?
Correct. Yes,
Okay.
all my classes are remotely, and
And-
I also have I have grief movement classes, and then I also have grief groups that don't encompass the grief yoga as well
okay.
too. Hmm.
And then you see people individually as well, and you do that remotely as well. So if somebody wanted to come to you because they're seeking psychotherapy, they could contact you for that as well, right?
Correct. Yes. So
Okay.
individual groups. Hmm.
Okay. And you're located in Southern California.
I am. Yes, I am in beautiful Monrovia, California.
Yeah, I used to live in Monrovia. It is
Yeah,
very beautiful. Yeah.
it is. Yes, I'm being very biased here.
Well, thank you so much for taking some time to come on my podcast. I know you're very busy, and I sure do appreciate you taking the time. You know, one of the things I've always admired about you is your compassion and your very gentle nature. And certainly, if we weren't friends and colleagues, I would go to you as a psychotherapist because I really do think you're a very professional and compassionate person. So thank you so much for being on my podcast. Are there any last words you want to put out to our listeners?
No, I really thank you, Ted, for having me with such an important topic that I feel we sometimes don't really talk about. So it's really, even with this collective grief that you're talking about, grief is coming a lot more to the surface of being talked about. So, that healing journey will continue. And if you need some support through that healing journey, I am here. So please feel free to reach out. And thank you so much for your kind words, Ted. I really embrace them.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks again. And everybody, you have that information. And if you didn't catch it, you can get in touch with me at tedmoreno.com and I'll provide that information for you. So everybody take good care of themselves, stay safe, and we will see you all soon. Bye, everybody.